husband hit his black wife at a party for refusing to quit her job. But what happened next shocked everyone. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Ashley adjusted the framed photo on her desk, ensuring it was perfectly aligned with the edge. The picture showed her and Ryan on their wedding day, smiling in the golden light of a summer afternoon. She sighed, brushing invisible dust from the frame, and sat back in her chair. The office around her buzzed with subdued activity. Muted keyboard clicks and quiet conversations created a rhythm she'd grown accustomed to. It was here, in the heart of the company's Austin headquarters, that she had spent the last 7 years building her career. At 33, Ashley had finally reached the position she'd dreamed of: Senior Project Manager. It was a title that represented not just a promotion, but years of late nights, relentless deadlines, and the resilience she had cultivated in an industry where she was often the only black woman in the room. This wasn't just about a title or a pay raise. It was about proving to herself and to the world that she belonged here. The congratulatory email from her boss still lingered in her inbox, a subtle badge of honor she'd glance at when the weight of her journey felt particularly heavy. "You've earned this, Ashley. Your leadership and dedication inspire the entire team." Those words had brought a lump to her throat. She had earned it. No one could take that away from her. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Ryan. "Don't forget about dinner with Mom tonight. She's expecting us at 7. Ashley hesitated before replying. Dinner with Mrs. Lancaster was never a casual affair. She imagined the woman's icy blue eyes scanning her from head to toe, searching for flaws, and her clipped voice offering backhanded compliments. It had been that way from the beginning. Mrs. Lancaster had made her disdain for Ashley abundantly clear, often masking her prejudice behind a veil of polite civility. Ashley had once overheard her say to Ryan, "She's driven, isn't she? A bit too driven for a woman, if you ask me." Ashley had hoped that time might soften the woman's opinions, but it hadn't. If anything, Mrs. Lancaster had grown bolder, her comments sharper, and Ryan, her sweet, kind Ryan, had always struggled to stand up to his mother. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ryan. "Let's try to make this one smooth, okay? She's been a little stressed lately." Ashley closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Sure. I'll meet you at home first," she replied. That evening, Ashley stood in front of her closet, debating what to wear. Mrs. Lancaster always had a way of making her feel scrutinized, no matter the outfit. Choosing a dress that was neither too flashy nor too plain felt like navigating a minefield. Finally, she settled on a navy sheath dress that struck the balance between professional and approachable. She paired it with simple gold earrings and a matching bracelet. Ryan was waiting for her downstairs, scrolling on his phone. When she appeared, he looked up and gave her a fleeting smile. "You look nice," he said, his tone perfunctory. "Thanks," Ashley replied, watching him for a moment. Lately, there had been a distance between them, subtle but undeniable. She chalked it up to stress. His job as a software engineer demanded long hours, and the pressure to keep up with her career likely added strain he wasn't willing to articulate. Still, she missed the easy laughter and shared moments that had defined their early years together. The car ride to Mrs. Lancaster's house was quiet, punctuated only by the hum of the engine. Ryan fiddled with the radio, settling on a station playing soft rock. Ashley stared out the window, her mind drifting to the plans for her upcoming promotion party. She had invited friends, colleagues, and family, hoping it would be a night to celebrate not just her birthday, but the culmination of years of hard work. Mrs. Lancaster lived in an immaculate suburban home with pristine white siding and a perfectly manicured lawn. As they pulled into the driveway, Ashley felt the familiar knot tighten in her stomach. "Ready?" Ryan asked, his hand lingering on the door handle. Ashley forced a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and polished wood. Mrs. Lancaster greeted them with a tight-lipped smile, her eyes flicking over Ashley's outfit before settling on Ryan. "There's my handsome son," she said, enveloping him in a hug. Her gaze shifted to Ashley. "And, Ashley, how professional you look tonight." Ashley bit back a retort, instead offering a polite, "Thank you." Dinner was a strained affair. Mrs. Lancaster dominated the conversation, steering it toward topics that left Ashley feeling sidelined. She spoke of her charity events, her bridge club, and, of course, Ryan's potential. "You know, Ryan, there's a director position opening at my friend's firm. A real leadership role, something you should consider." Ashley glanced at Ryan, whose posture stiffened. "I like where I'm at, Mom," he said, his tone clipped. "Still," Mrs. Lancaster pressed, "you wouldn't want to get too comfortable, especially when—" She trailed off, her eyes darting to Ashley. "Especially when what?" Ashley asked, her voice calm but firm. "Oh, nothing," Mrs. Lancaster said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Just thinking aloud." Ashley clenched her fists under the table, determined not to let the woman get under her skin. When dinner ended, Mrs. Lancaster pulled Ryan aside, leaving Ashley alone in the dining room. She could hear snippets of their conversation. Her name mentioned, followed by phrases like respectable household and traditional roles. When they returned, Ryan's expression was unreadable. The ride home was silent. Ashley could feel tension radiating from Ryan, but she didn't press. Instead, she stared out the window, watching the darkened streets blur into streaks of light. The next morning, Ashley threw herself into work, finding solace in the structure and predictability of her projects. She exchanged ideas with her team, managed deadlines, and reviewed proposals for an upcoming client presentation. Work had always been her sanctuary, a place where her competence was unquestioned and her identity was defined by results, not by preconceived notions. But even in the sanctuary of her office, the weight of the previous night lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling that Mrs. Lancaster's words had planted a seed of doubt in Ryan, a doubt that threatened the foundation of their marriage. Ashley glanced at the clock. In 2 days, she would celebrate her birthday and her promotion with the people who mattered most. She hoped that the party would be a turning point, a reminder to Ryan and to herself that they were a team, capable of weathering any storm. As she gathered her things to leave for the day, her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. About the party. "Do you really think it's necessary?" Ashley stared at the screen, a flicker of frustration igniting in her chest. She took a deep breath, typing her reply. "Yes, I do. It's important to me." The message sent, she slipped her phone into her bag and stepped into the cool evening air. The weight of the days ahead pressed against her, but she resolved to carry it. She had worked too hard, fought too long, to let anything diminish her moment. It was only the beginning, but Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that the celebration she envisioned might not go as planned. The day of Ashley's party dawned bright and warm, the kind of spring day that seemed made for celebration. The soft Texas breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine through the open windows of her and Ryan's modest yet charming home. Ashley had spent the morning setting up decorations, twinkling string lights, colorful banners, and an assortment of balloons in muted, elegant tones. A table in the corner displayed a carefully chosen cake, topped with the words, "Happy Birthday and Congratulations," written in delicate cursive icing. Her heart swelled with a mix of pride and anticipation. This wasn't just a birthday party. It was a celebration of everything she had achieved, a symbol of her perseverance in an industry that wasn't always welcoming. She had worked tirelessly to make this moment a reality, and tonight she wanted to bask in the warmth of her friends, colleagues, and family. Ryan, however, was quieter than usual. As she moved through the house, adjusting decorations and ensuring everything was perfect, he lingered in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone or staring out the window. He hadn't said much about the party since the terse exchange they'd had via text. His silence felt heavy, a weight that pressed down on the otherwise buoyant atmosphere. "Ryan," Ashley called, stepping into the kitchen where he stood nursing a cup of coffee. "Can you help me hang the last string of lights outside?" He looked up, startled, as if he hadn't noticed her come in. "Oh, yeah, sure," he said, setting his mug down. He followed her outside, the faint creak of the screen door punctuating the silence between them. As they worked, Ashley tried to engage him in conversation about the guests and the menu, but his responses were clipped, his tone distracted. Finally, she paused, looking at him directly. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft but searching. Ryan hesitated, his eyes darting away. "I'm fine," he said after a moment. "Just a lot on my mind." Ashley wanted to press further, to ask what exactly was weighing on him, but the sound of her phone buzzing from inside interrupted them. She sighed, offering him a small smile. "We'll talk later, okay?" He nodded, though his expression didn't change. As evening approached, guests began to arrive. The house soon filled with the hum of conversation, bursts of laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Ashley moved through the crowd with a warm smile, her heart lifting as she saw familiar faces. Emily, her closest colleague, was among the first to congratulate her. "You did it, Ashley," Emily exclaimed, pulling her into a tight hug. "Senior project manager. I've been telling everyone that you're the reason our team is so successful." Ashley laughed, her cheeks flushing with gratitude. "Thank you, Emily. I couldn't have done it without all of you." The warmth of her friend's support was a balm to her nerves. She found herself relaxing, letting the joy of the evening wash over her. Even Ryan seemed to lighten up, chatting with a few of her colleagues near the drinks table. For a moment, it felt like everything might turn out the way she had hoped. And then Mrs. Lancaster arrived. She swept into the room like a cold front, her sharp gaze cutting through the festive atmosphere. Her presence was unmistakable. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a string of pearls resting against her collarbone, and an air of superiority that seemed to follow her everywhere. She greeted Ryan with a warm embrace, then turned to Ashley with a tight smile. "Happy birthday," she said, her tone as clipped as ever, "and congratulations on whatever it is you're celebrating." Ashley forced a polite smile, choosing not to take the bait. "Thank you. It means a lot to have everyone here tonight." Mrs. Lancaster didn't respond, instead turning her attention back to Ryan. "You've been keeping busy, haven't you?" she asked him, her voice softening in a way it never did when she spoke to Ashley. "How's work? Have you given any more thought to that director position I mentioned?" Ryan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "It's something to think about," he said vaguely. Ashley's stomach turned. She could feel the familiar undercurrent of tension Mrs. Lancaster brought with her, a subtle but persistent effort to undermine her at every opportunity. As the evening wore on, Ashley gathered the guests in the living room for a brief speech. She stood beside Ryan, her heart racing as she faced the smiling faces of her friends and colleagues. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "This has been an incredible year for me, and I couldn't have done it without the support of my amazing team, my wonderful friends, and of course, my husband, Ryan." She glanced at him, expecting a smile, but his expression was unreadable. Pushing past the momentary pang of unease, she continued, "I'm excited to share that I've been promoted to Senior Project Manager. It's a role I've worked toward for years, and I'm so grateful to be able to celebrate this milestone with all of you." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Ashley felt a wave of warmth and pride, but as she scanned the crowd, her eyes landed on Mrs. Lancaster. The woman's face was a mask of displeasure, her lips pressed into a thin line. Leaning toward Ryan, she whispered something into his ear. Ashley couldn't hear the words, but the effect was immediate. Ryan's shoulders tensed, and when he looked at Ashley, his expression was clouded with something she couldn't quite place. Resentment? Frustration? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Ashley tried to savor the moment, but the weight of Ryan's silence and Mrs. Lancaster's presence loomed over her like a storm cloud. By the time the last guests had left, the house felt oppressively quiet. Ryan sat on the edge of the couch, his head in his hands. Ashley approached him cautiously, her own nerves frayed. "Ryan, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and something else, something darker. "We need to talk," he said, his tone low and sharp, "about this, about everything." Ashley's heart sank. She knew this was only the beginning. The house was eerily quiet after the guests had left, the hum of laughter and celebration replaced by a suffocating tension. Ashley stood in the kitchen, rinsing wine glasses under the steady stream of water, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The way Ryan had looked at her during the party lingered in her mind, a coldness she hadn't seen before, like he was staring at a stranger rather than his wife. Ryan sat in the living room, hunched over on the couch with his head in his hands. The weight of his silence filled the house, pressing down on Ashley's chest. She dried her hands, placed the glass on the counter, and walked toward him. "Ryan," she said softly, hesitating near the doorway, "what's going on? You've been distant all evening." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and something she couldn't quite place. "We need to talk," he said, his tone sharper than she'd expected. Ashley nodded, taking a seat across from him. She folded her hands in her lap, bracing herself. "Okay, let's talk." Ryan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. This promotion, Ashley," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "I just don't know if it's the best thing for us." Ashley blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean? This is everything I've worked for, Ryan. It's a huge step forward for my career." "Yeah, but what about us?" He shot back, his voice rising slightly. "What about our future? Starting a family? You're so focused on your career that it feels like there's no room for anything else." Ashley felt the sting of his words, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Ryan, we've talked about this. My career is important to me, but that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about our future. This promotion means more stability for us. It's not just about me." He shook his head, his frustration spilling over. "You don't get it, do you? Every time you climb higher, it's like I'm being left behind. People look at us and think, oh, there's Ryan, the guy whose wife is more successful than him." Ashley's jaw tightened. Is that what this is about? Your ego? Because I thought we were partners, Ryan. I thought we supported each other." Ryan's laugh was bitter, almost mocking. "Partners? That's rich, Ashley. Do you even realize how it looks? How it feels to be the one standing in your shadow all the time?" His words hit her like a slap. She stared at him, struggling to find the right response. "I've never asked you to stand in my shadow," she said, her voice trembling. "I've only ever wanted us to build a life together as equals." "Equals?" Ryan's voice was sharp now, his frustration boiling over. "That's not what this feels like, Ashley. It feels like you're always putting your career first. And now, with this promotion, it's only going to get worse." Ashley stood up, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "So what are you saying, Ryan? That I should turn down the promotion, quit my job, stay at home and play the role your mother thinks I should?" At the mention of his mother, Ryan's face darkened. "Don't bring her into this," he warned. "She's already in it," Ashley snapped, unable to hold back any longer. "She's been in it from the beginning, whispering in your ear, undermining me every chance she gets. And instead of standing up for me, you let her. You let her make me feel like I'm not enough." Ryan stood now, towering over her, his face flushed with anger. "Maybe she's right," he said, his voice low but cutting. "Maybe you're not the kind of wife I need." The room seemed to tilt, the weight of his words knocking the air from her lungs. Ashley felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "If that's how you feel, then maybe I've been fighting for something that doesn't exist," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan's fists clenched at his sides. "You don't know when to stop, do you? You just keep pushing and pushing." "And what would you have me do, Ryan?" she demanded, her voice rising now. "Shrink myself? Give up everything I've worked for just to make you feel bigger? I won't do it." His expression twisted into something unrecognizable, a mix of anger and pain. And then, in a moment that felt both shocking and surreal, his hand lashed out, striking her across the face. The sound was deafening in the silence that followed, a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the house. Ashley stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek, where a fiery pain bloomed. She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Ryan froze, his hand still raised as if he couldn't believe what he'd just done. "Ashley," he began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Don't," she said, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "Don't you dare." She turned and walked toward the stairs, her vision blurred with tears. In their bedroom, she grabbed a bag and began stuffing it with clothes and essentials. Her hands shook as she moved, her mind racing. This was it. This was the line she couldn't let him cross. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Ashley, wait. I didn't mean—" "You did," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "You meant every word, every action. And I'm done." She slung the bag over her shoulder and pushed past him, ignoring his protests. As she walked out the front door and into the cool night air, she felt the weight of years of compromise and silence lifting off her shoulders. Her cheek still throbbed, a physical reminder of the breaking point she never thought they'd reach. Sliding into her car, she gripped the steering wheel and took a shaky breath. The house grew smaller in her rearview mirror as she drove away, her tears finally falling. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't go back. Not now, not ever. The road stretched before Ashley like an endless path, lit only by the faint glow of streetlights. The silence in the car was oppressive, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few hours. Her hand still stung from where Ryan's slap had landed, but the pain in her heart overshadowed it, a heavy ache that threatened to consume her. Where do I even go? She thought, her mind racing. She hadn't planned for this. She hadn't planned for him to snap, for him to become someone she didn't recognize. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white against the leather. The car hummed steadily as she navigated through the familiar streets of Austin, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Everything had shifted, broken apart in a way that felt irreparable. She could still hear Ryan's words echoing in her mind, his anger, his accusation that she was too focused on her career, too focused on being successful. She'd never expected him to resent her for that. As she turned onto the highway, her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a message from Emily, her close friend and colleague, the one person she could always rely on. "You okay? I haven't heard from you in a while. Let me know if you need anything." Ashley stared at the message, her chest tightening. She wanted to respond, to tell Emily everything, but she couldn't. Not yet. She didn't know how to explain it, how to unravel the mess that had unfolded in the last few hours. Instead, she locked her phone and focused on the road ahead. It wasn't until she drove past the familiar exit to her apartment that she realized she didn't know where she was going. She couldn't go back to the house, not after what had happened. She couldn't bear the thought of being in that house with the echoes of Ryan's rage lingering in every room. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Ryan. She hesitated, staring at the screen for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Her finger hovered over the green button, then hovered again. She let it ring, and when the call eventually ended, she exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. She pulled off the highway and into a small parking lot, a quiet corner of the city where she had once stayed at a friend's apartment during a work project. It was a place she could hide for a while, away from everything. She parked the car and sat there, staring through the windshield. The streets were empty at this time of night, and the city felt like a distant world, far from the heartbreak she had just left behind. Ashley grabbed her bag from the passenger seat and got out of the car, walking slowly toward the entrance of the building. She didn't have keys to the apartment anymore. She hadn't stayed there in months. But the landlord, a kind older woman who always greeted her with a warm smile, had given her the spare key for emergencies. When she stepped inside the building, the smell of old wood and dust greeted her, a comforting scent that seemed to belong to another time. She made her way up the narrow staircase and unlocked the door to the apartment. The small space was exactly how she remembered it, cozy with simple furniture and a view of the city skyline through the windows. As she set down her bag, the weight of everything hit her. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The tears she had been holding back all night finally spilled over, and for the first time since leaving Ryan's house, she allowed herself to cry. The floodgates opened, and she cried for everything that had led her to this point. The years of building her career, the hopes and dreams she had once shared with Ryan, the love she thought they had. She cried for the woman who had been slapped by the man she had once trusted, the man who had vowed to love and protect her. She cried for the future that now felt uncertain, as if the very foundation of her life had crumbled beneath her. After what felt like hours, Ashley wiped her eyes and sat up. She needed to pull herself together. She couldn't stay here, lost in the sorrow. She had always been strong, always pushed through when things got tough. She couldn't let this break her. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Startled, Ashley got to her feet and walked over to the door, wondering who could be there at this hour. When she opened it, she found Emily standing in the hallway, her expression filled with concern. "Hey," Emily said softly, stepping inside when Ashley didn't say anything. "I was worried about you. I know it's late, but I couldn't stop thinking about you." Ashley didn't know how to respond. She didn't want to cry in front of Emily, didn't want to break down even more. But her friend's presence was a balm to her aching soul. I didn't know where else to go," Ashley said, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't go back to the house. Not after everything." Emily nodded, understanding without needing to ask for details. "It's okay. You don't have to explain. I'm just glad you're here. You're safe, okay?" Ashley sank down onto the couch again, and Emily sat beside her. There was silence for a moment as they both stared at the floor, but Ashley could feel the weight of her friend's support. She didn't have to carry this burden alone. "What happened, Ashley?" Emily asked gently. "What did he do?" Ashley hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say the words, to tell Emily about the slap, about the anger, about the betrayal, but the pain was still too fresh, too raw. Instead, she took a deep breath and simply said, "He hit me. I never thought he could, but he did." Emily's eyes widened in shock, and she reached for Ashley's hand, holding it tightly. "Oh my God, Ashley, I'm so sorry. No one should ever do that to you. You're not alone in this." Ashley nodded, grateful for her friend's kindness, but she still couldn't shake the feeling that her world had shattered. How could she have been so blind to everything that had been building up? How could she have missed the signs that something like this was inevitable? "I don't know what to do, Emily," Ashley said, her voice trembling. "I never thought it would come to this. I loved him, and now I feel like I don't even know him anymore." Emily squeezed her hand. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight, but you're strong, Ashley. You'll get through this, and I'll be here every step of the way. You have people who love you." Ashley looked at her friend, tears welling up once again. For the first time that night, she felt a glimmer of hope, a small light in the darkness. She didn't know what her next step would be, but she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't have to face it alone. As she leaned back into the couch, Emily sat beside her, and for the first time in hours, Ashley allowed herself to rest, to find comfort in the presence of a friend who had never wavered. But tomorrow, she knew, she would have to face the consequences of her decision. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to rebuild. The early morning light filtered through the small apartment's windows, casting soft shadows across the room. Ashley lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. The events of the previous night felt surreal, as though they had happened to someone else. But the pain in her cheek, the knot in her stomach, the emptiness in her heart, those were real. The slap, the words, the look on Ryan's face as he stood there, his hand still raised, as if he couldn't comprehend what he had just done. Ashley shifted, propping herself up on the armrest of the couch. She didn't know how long she had been awake. Hours? Minutes? Time had become irrelevant. Her thoughts kept circling back to the same thing. How had they gotten here? How had she ended up in this tiny apartment, alone, with everything she thought she knew about her life crumbling around her? She glanced at her phone, which was sitting on the coffee table. It had been silent for hours. No calls, no messages from Ryan. It wasn't like him to go quiet for this long, but then again, she hadn't expected him to respond in any other way. He was probably trying to process it, trying to justify it to himself the way he always had when things got difficult. But this was different. This wasn't a petty argument about finances or career goals. This was violence. This was betrayal. She wiped a stray tear from her cheek and stood up, walking over to the small kitchen to make coffee. As the water boiled, her mind wandered to the future. She hadn't planned for this. She hadn't planned to leave her husband, to question everything she had worked for and believed in. But now, the weight of it all felt too heavy to ignore. The decision to leave Ryan was still raw, still painful. But it was also clear. There was no going back. He had crossed a line that could never be undone. Ashley's phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text message from Emily. "How are you holding up? Let me know if you need to talk. I'm here for you." Ashley smiled softly, grateful for Emily's unwavering support. She typed a quick reply. "I'm okay. Just trying to figure out what comes next. But I'm so glad you're here for me. I really need it." The coffee machine clicked as it finished brewing, and Ashley poured herself a mug, feeling the warmth seep into her hands. She took a sip, savoring the rich comfort and taste. She needed clarity. She needed a plan. Her thoughts shifted to her career. For years, she had poured herself into her work. It was the one thing that had always remained constant in her life. And now, with the promotion to senior project manager, everything was aligning. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to prove herself, to show everyone who had ever doubted her that she was more than just a woman in a male-dominated industry. She was a force to be reckoned with. And yet, that very success had become the catalyst for the destruction of her marriage. It was the one thing Ryan couldn't handle. Her success, her drive, her ambition. It had become a threat to him. And now she had to rebuild, not just her career, but her sense of self. She set her coffee mug down and grabbed her phone again, scrolling through her contacts. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed the number for a divorce attorney she had found online the night before. She hadn't planned to reach out so soon, but the decision had been made. There was no going back. When the call connected, a calm voice answered on the other end. "Good morning. This is Lisa Cohen. How can I help you today?" Ashley's voice felt foreign to her, but she forced herself to speak. "Hi, my name is Ashley Lancaster, and I'm looking to start the divorce process. I'm not sure where to begin, but I need some advice." Lisa paused for a moment. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Ashley. We can definitely help you through this. Let's start by scheduling a consultation, and we can discuss the next steps." Ashley agreed, setting an appointment for the following week. The decision had been made, and now the paperwork would begin. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the emotional toll it would take, but she knew she had to do it. For herself. For her future. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork, sleepless nights, and quiet moments of reflection. Emily stayed by her side, offering support and helping her sort through the logistics of everything. The reality of ending her marriage, of cutting ties with the life she had once imagined for herself, was overwhelming. But it was also liberating. She had taken control of her destiny, and that was something she had never done before. At work, Ashley threw herself into her projects, using them as an escape from the emotional chaos of her personal life. Her colleagues, though sympathetic to her situation, were impressed by her ability to maintain her professionalism in the face of such turmoil. Her boss, Mr. Johnson, had been especially understanding, offering words of encouragement whenever they spoke. "Ashley," he said one afternoon as they sat in his office, I know you've been through a lot, and I just want to remind you that you're not alone in this. You've got the support of the entire team. We all respect you and what you bring to the table. Don't forget that." Ashley nodded, grateful for his words. She had always prided herself on her work ethic, her dedication to her team, and the way she could lead with both strength and empathy. But now, more than ever, she realized that it wasn't just about proving herself to others. It was about proving to herself that she could stand tall, even when the ground beneath her feet felt uncertain. That evening, after a long day at work, Ashley found herself sitting at her kitchen table, sipping another cup of coffee as she scrolled through her phone. Her inbox was full of messages from Ryan, texts and voicemails apologizing, pleading for her to come back to talk to him, but she ignored them all. The woman she had been, the one who had given Ryan the benefit of the doubt time and time again, was gone. The woman before her was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth and wasn't willing to let anyone, not even the man she had loved, diminish it. As the days passed, Ashley began to notice small changes within herself. She was more confident, more determined, and more focused on her future. She started attending conferences, speaking at industry events, and mentoring young women who looked up to her as a role model. One of those women, Lily, an intern who had recently joined the company, was particularly eager to learn from Ashley's experiences. "You're amazing, Ashley," Lily said one afternoon as they sat in Ashley's office reviewing a project. "I just hope I can be as successful as you one day." Ashley smiled, a feeling of pride swelling within her. "You can be. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I've been where you are, starting out, facing doubts. But you've got something that can't be taught, passion. If you keep pushing forward, there's nothing that can stop you." As the weeks went by, Lily's progress in the company was evident. She was eager to learn, and Ashley enjoyed watching her develop into a capable and confident professional. It reminded Ashley of the drive that had gotten her where she was today, the same drive that had brought her to the decision to leave Ryan, to take control of her life and create a future that was entirely her own. But even as she focused on her career, a lingering sadness tugged at her heart. Ryan continued to reach out, his regret pouring through his messages. He apologized over and over, asking for forgiveness, pleading for another chance. But Ashley knew that forgiveness couldn't undo what had been done. She couldn't keep holding on to something that had become toxic, something that no longer served her. Her future was hers to shape, and she was determined to make it a bright one. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Ashley was ready. Ready to take the next step in her career, ready to find peace within herself, and ready to embrace the new chapter of her life that was unfolding before her. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. The woman she was becoming, strong, independent, and empowered, was who she was meant to be all along. And this was only the beginning. The cold air nipped at Ashley's skin as she walked into the conference center, the hum of excited chatter in the air. Today was a milestone, but not just in her career. Today was a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had overcome. It had been months since she had left Ryan, since she had walked out of the house with nothing but the clothes on her back, unsure of what the future held. Now she was here, speaking at a conference for women in tech, sharing her story, her struggles, and her triumphs with a room full of eager, ambitious faces. Ashley smoothed down her blazer, straightening her posture as she walked toward the stage. The butterflies in her stomach were more from excitement than nerves. She had worked hard to get to this point, and this was her chance to give back, to show other women in the industry that they didn't have to choose between their careers and their self-worth. They could have both. She had spent weeks preparing for this speech, crafting every word, every sentence, so it would resonate with the audience. This wasn't just about her journey. It was about lifting others up, showing them that they could break free from the same barriers she had once faced. As she took the microphone in hand, she scanned the room, her heart swelling as she saw the sea of faces before her. Some were young and wide-eyed, others older and wiser, but all of them had come for the same reason: to learn, to grow, and to find inspiration. She began slowly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here today, sharing my journey with all of you. I know firsthand how difficult it can be to navigate this industry, especially as women. We face challenges every day, whether it's overcoming stereotypes, breaking through glass ceilings, or learning to assert ourselves in rooms that weren't always designed for us." Ashley paused, taking a deep breath. "But I'm here to tell you that it's possible. I stand here today not because I'm special, but because I refuse to give up. I refused to let anyone define my worth, including myself." She glanced around the room, catching the eye of a few women in the front row. Some were nodding along, others were taking notes. She could feel their energy, their hunger for change. "I've been where many of you are," Ashley continued. "I've faced the struggles of balancing career and personal life, of dealing with people who thought I wasn't good enough simply because of the color of my skin or the fact that I'm a woman. And I've made mistakes. I've let fear hold me back. I've stayed in relationships that weren't healthy for me because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. But I've learned that in order to truly thrive, you have to believe in yourself, no matter what anyone else thinks." Her words seemed to echo in the room, the silence deepening as she spoke her truth. She could feel the weight of her experience, the weight of her pain, transforming into something powerful, something that could help others. "I left my marriage," Ashley said, her voice strong but vulnerable. "I never thought I would be standing here today, sharing that part of my life with all of you, but I realized that in order to move forward, I had to break free from the things that were holding me back. And sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the most growth." She looked down at her hands, steadying herself for a moment. "I wasn't always this confident. I wasn't always this strong. But every day I chose to believe in myself. And that's what I want you to take from this today. No matter where you are in your journey, no matter how hard it gets, you have the power to change your story. You have the power to rewrite the narrative." Ashley could feel her heart beating faster, the energy in the room building. She knew she had their attention. She could see the hope in their eyes, the fire igniting within them. This was why she had come. This was why she had left everything behind. To help women like them realize their potential. To help them see that they didn't have to shrink themselves to fit into someone else's idea of success. "You don't need permission to take up space," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "You don't need anyone's approval to pursue your dreams. You don't need anyone to tell you that you're good enough, because you already are. Your worth is not defined by your job title, your relationship, or your past mistakes. It's defined by you." The applause that followed was thunderous, the room filling with the sound of women standing up, clapping, cheering. Ashley's heart swelled with pride, the weight of her journey finally feeling like it had a purpose. She had come through the fire, and now she was standing tall on the other side, a beacon of hope for others who were still finding their way. As she stepped down from the stage, Emily was waiting for her at the side. "That was incredible," Emily said, her eyes shining with admiration. "You've changed so many lives today, Ashley." Ashley smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I hope so. I didn't just want to talk about what I've been through. I wanted them to know that it's possible to overcome, that even when everything seems lost, you can rebuild." Emily nodded. "You're a true inspiration." Ashley's smile widened as she glanced back at the crowd, now full of women networking, talking, and sharing their own stories. She knew that this was just the beginning. She had found her voice, and now it was her responsibility to help others find theirs. The next few weeks passed in a blur of speaking engagements, mentoring sessions, and quiet moments of reflection. Ashley's confidence grew, and so did her reputation in the industry. She was invited to join panels, participate in roundtable discussions, and speak at conferences across the country. She was becoming a leader, not just in her field, but in the movement for equality and empowerment for women in tech. One evening, after another successful speaking event, Ashley found herself sitting in her hotel room, reflecting on everything that had happened in the past few months. She had come so far. She had fought for her career, for her independence, and most of all for her peace. And she wasn't done yet. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "I got promoted today, senior developer. I couldn't have done it without you." Ashley smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had helped Lily get to this point, had mentored her through the challenges of the industry, and now Lily was standing on her own, just as Ashley had done. "I'm so proud of you, Lily. This is just the beginning for you. Keep going." As she sent the message, Ashley looked out the window at the city lights below. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely at peace. She had taken control of her life. She had chosen herself. And the future was brighter than ever. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And she was determined to keep pushing forward, to keep fighting for herself, for others, and for the future she was building. This was her time, and she wasn't going to waste it. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains of Ashley's apartment, casting long shadows on the floor. She sat at the small kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling beside her as she stared at the phone in her hands. The messages from Ryan continued to pour in, each one more desperate than the last. He was trying, desperately, to reach her, pleading for her forgiveness, for a chance to fix what he had broken. But Ashley knew. She had known from the moment she left that there would be no going back. No amount of regret, no number of apologies could undo what had happened. The man who had once been her partner had shown her a side of himself she could never unsee. His anger, his jealousy, his inability to support her when she needed him most, it wasn't something she could just forgive. She had tried to convince herself that love was enough, that love could overcome everything, but now, with time and space between them, she could see the truth. Love, real love, wasn't about control. It wasn't about one person suppressing their dreams for the other. It was about mutual respect, about two people growing together, not one person holding the other back. She wiped her eyes, her throat tightening as the weight of the decision she had made settled in again. It wasn't easy. Leaving Ryan, the man she had loved for years, had torn her apart in ways she hadn't expected. But now, the pieces of her life were slowly coming back together, and with each passing day, she felt stronger. Ashley had learned that in order to truly move forward, she had to close the doors of the past. She had to leave behind the man who had failed to see her worth, the man who had tried to define her by his own insecurities. And that meant saying goodbye. Not just to Ryan, but to the version of herself that had been willing to accept less than she deserved. As she read through the messages again, her thumb hovered over the delete button. Ryan's words were heartfelt, and for a moment, she allowed herself to remember the good times they had shared, the laughter, the quiet moments, the plans for the future. But then she remembered the violence, the humiliation, the way he had slowly chipped away at her self-worth until she had nothing left to give. She couldn't go back. She wouldn't go back. With a final sigh, she hit the delete button, wiping his messages from her screen. It felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was finally letting go of the last remnants of the life she had once thought would define her. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it was an email from her lawyer. The subject line read, "Divorce proceedings, next steps." She opened it, her hands trembling slightly as she scanned the details of the process. The next steps were clear now: filing the paperwork, finalizing the terms, and preparing for what would likely be a difficult and emotional journey. But she was ready. She had already taken the hardest step, and she wasn't about to back down now. She couldn't afford to. The following week was a whirlwind of legal meetings, more paperwork than Ashley could count, and moments of deep reflection. As much as she had prepared herself for this, there were still times when doubt crept in. Was she doing the right thing? Was she making the right choice for her future? There were nights when the silence of her apartment felt deafening, and the absence of Ryan's presence made her question everything. But then she would remember the anger in his eyes, the words he had thrown at her, the slap that had shattered any illusion of hope. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a failure. She had walked away because she had to, because she deserved better. And every day she reminded herself of that. She wasn't just moving on from Ryan. She was moving on from a version of herself that had let fear dictate her choices. The woman she was becoming was brave. She was strong, and most importantly, she was in control of her own life. One evening, after another long day of work and meetings, Ashley was sitting in her living room, her laptop open in front of her. She was going through her calendar, preparing for the upcoming week's events, when she noticed a familiar name in her inbox. It was a message from Lily, the intern who had blossomed under her mentorship over the past few months. "Hey, Ashley, I wanted to let you know that I got the promotion. I'm officially a senior developer now. I can't believe it." Ashley smiled to herself, her heart swelling with pride. Lily had worked so hard, and to see her succeed was a testament to the mentorship Ashley had given her. It wasn't just about teaching technical skills, it was about helping Lily build confidence, to believe in her abilities, and to push past the obstacles that stood in her way. "Congratulations, Lily," Ashley typed quickly. "I knew you had it in you. I'm so proud of you. This is just the beginning of an amazing journey for you." She hit send and leaned back in her chair, feeling a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't felt in a long time. For all the pain she had experienced, she was making a difference. She was lifting others up, helping them realize their own potential, just as she had learned to do for herself. As she sat there, staring at her phone, Ashley couldn't help but reflect on her own journey. The road had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place she never expected. She was no longer the woman who let herself be controlled by fear. She was no longer the woman who stayed in a relationship that diminished her. She was no longer the woman who let anyone define her worth. She was the woman who took control of her own life. The woman who chose to rise above the challenges and turn them into opportunities. The woman who embraced her strength, her intelligence, and her worth. And as the days passed, she continued to rise, inching closer to the woman she had always been meant to be. Weeks later, when the divorce was finalized, Ashley sat down to sign the papers. There was no sense of victory, no rush of emotion. It was simply the end of a chapter. A painful chapter, yes, but one that had taught her invaluable lessons. She had learned that strength wasn't always about power or dominance. It was about knowing when to walk away, when to say no, when to choose yourself over everything else. As she signed her name, Ashley felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was it. This was her new beginning. The past was behind her, and the future was wide open, waiting for her to take the next step. She was ready. The office buzzed with activity, the hum of conversation and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards creating a familiar backdrop to Ashley's day. She sat at her desk, her focus sharp as she reviewed the final drafts for the presentation she would be given at the upcoming leadership summit. Her career was flourishing. There was no denying that. The promotion, the speaking engagements, the recognition, it was everything she had worked for. But more than that, it was validation. She had proven herself, not just to her colleagues in the industry, but to herself. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change. Every day had brought new challenges, new opportunities, and new lessons. But through it all, one thing remained clear. She was no longer the woman she had been before. She wasn't the woman who feared stepping into the spotlight, who let others dictate her worth, who stayed silent in the face of mistreatment. That woman had been lost to the past. This woman, the one sitting here, leading meetings, mentoring young women, inspiring others, was confident, capable, and unapologetic. The door to her office opened, and Emily stepped inside holding a cup of coffee. She had been a steady presence in Ashley's life, offering support when it felt like everything was falling apart, and celebrating her successes when they came. "Hey," Emily greeted, setting the coffee down on Ashley's desk. "How's it going?" Ashley smiled, stretching her arms above her head. "Busy, but good. I'm prepping for the summit next week. I think I'm finally getting the hang of this whole leading thing." Emily chuckled. "You were born for this, Ashley. You've been leading your whole life, even when you didn't know it." Ashley's smile widened, and she leaned back in her chair. "I guess that's true. I've had to learn to lead myself first." There was a pause as Emily looked at her thoughtfully. "How are you really doing? I know you've been so focused on work, but you've been through a lot lately." Ashley's expression softened. She knew Emily was asking more than just about her career. She was asking about the emotional toll of everything that had happened. The divorce, the heartbreak, the rediscovery of who she was. "I'm good," Ashley said quietly. "Better than I've ever been. It's hard, sometimes. The loneliness, the uncertainty, but I know it's what I needed to do. I couldn't keep living the way I was. I wasn't living, I was surviving." Emily nodded, understanding. "You're thriving now, and you deserve it." Ashley felt a surge of gratitude. She didn't know where she'd be without Emily's unwavering support, without the kindness and encouragement that had kept her going when she thought she couldn't take another step. "Thank you," Ashley said, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have gotten here without you. I don't think I even realized how much I needed someone to believe in me until I found you." Emily smiled warmly. We all need someone, Ashley. But you've done the hard work. You've become the person you needed all along, and now you're helping others do the same." Ashley's heart swelled with pride. She had found a new purpose in her work, in her mentorship, in the women she had helped. She had discovered a strength in herself that she hadn't known existed. And with every woman she guided, every success they achieved, she realized that she was building something even more important than a career. She was building a legacy. The door to her office opened again, and this time it was Lily, the young intern who had quickly become one of Ashley's most promising mentees. She had come to Ashley seeking advice, unsure of herself in the male-dominated tech world. But now, months later, Lily was confident, assertive, and standing tall as a senior developer. "Hey, Ashley," Lily greeted with a bright smile. "Do you have a minute? I wanted to run something by you." "Of course," Ashley replied, motioning to the chair across from her desk. "What's on your mind?" Lily sat down, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been offered a leadership position at another company," she said, her eyes wide with excitement and a hint of uncertainty. "It's a huge opportunity, but I don't know if I'm ready for it. I don't want to leave this team, but I also don't want to miss out on what could be the next big step in my career." Ashley studied Lily for a moment, considering her words carefully. She had watched Lily grow over the months, had seen the spark in her eyes turn into something more powerful, the determination to succeed no matter the obstacles. "You're ready," Ashley said firmly. "You've been ready all along. You've got the skills, the drive, and the passion. And you've proven that you're not afraid to take risks, even when it's uncomfortable." Lily's eyes widened and a small smile tugged at her lips. "You really think so?" "I know so," Ashley said. "This industry isn't easy, but you've already shown that you can handle whatever comes your way. Sometimes you have to take the leap, even if you're not sure of the landing. But trust me, you'll land on your feet. And when you do, you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish." Lily nodded, her confidence growing with each word Ashley spoke. "Thank you. I think I'm ready to take the job. I just needed someone to remind me of what I'm capable of." Ashley smiled warmly. "That's what I'm here for, to remind you that you can do anything you set your mind to." As Lily left the office, Ashley felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why she had left everything behind, to help others find their own strength, to inspire them to push past their doubts and fears just as she had. She had built her career on that belief, and now she was sharing it with others. Her phone buzzed again, and Ashley glanced down. It was a message from the team leader at the upcoming leadership summit. "Ashley, just wanted to confirm your speaking slot for next week. We're so excited to have you join the panel. Your story has been such an inspiration to the team, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say." Ashley's heart swelled. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She had fought for this moment, for the chance to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized for everything she had accomplished. And now, as she prepared to share her story with a room full of leaders, she realized that the journey had only just begun. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for every woman who had ever been told she couldn't, who had ever been silenced, who had ever been made to feel like she wasn't enough. She was speaking for the women who had come after her, the ones who would follow in her footsteps and forge their own paths. She had taken control of her life. And now, she was using her voice to change the world. As she stood up from her desk, a sense of peace washed over her. She had come so far from the woman who had been too afraid to leave, from the woman who had let fear dictate her choices. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer apologizing for who she was. The future was hers to create. And this was just the beginning. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more content like this. Check out our other videos for more inspiring stories and ideas. If you enjoyed this one, share it with your friends and let them be part of the journey too.